All right, welcome back to the web series. Today we're going to talk about real estate with Tierra. Tierra, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Scott. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Let's jump into this. So one of the first things I like to do is give our audience a little bit of knowledge about your background. So if you can fill us in.
Sure. So I'm originally from Philadelphia. Did my undergrad at Georgetown. I was a math major, political science minor. Immediately before coming to business school, I spent 3 years at a company called Freddie Mac, which a lot of people probably have heard of. I was in their multifamily division and then specifically on their affordable housing team. So that meant that I was underwriting loans for properties across the affordability spectrum. So mostly on the debt side. And I came to business school because I wanted to immerse myself in the real estate industry, learn a lot more about where I could land, and really be intentional about my career goals. And so ultimately I was looking for a career that was quantitatively challenging to sort of fit my educational background, but then it offered a way to be involved in the communities that I lived in. So that's kind of how I settled on real estate.
Awesome. And just to kind of cover my bases, you were kind of all in on real estate prior to coming to business school?
Pretty much. So my first year out of school, I worked for a senator for a year, but that was only because I was looking for real estate jobs. I didn't really know how to find one, not being in the business school in undergrad. So it took me a little time. Considered public policy for like all of 1 month. And then I was so bored that I said, absolutely not.
Awesome. Real estate's incredibly interesting and actually transitions well to learning a little bit about real estate. And I know we discussed previously that there's just a lot of avenues within real estate. So I'd love if you can break down how that works, especially from an MBA perspective.
Sure. So, I mean, in general, real estate is considered a non-traditional path because it doesn't fall in one of the major food groups that people go to business school to be a part of. However, there's still a lot of opportunity in the industry, but I'll start with sort of the most common places that people want to land when they do real estate. One is development, which is actually what I thought I wanted to do when I went to business school, and that is working for a company that's building buildings or schools or whatever, from the ground up and going through the whole development process. And those deals take more time, usually about 12 to 24 months or longer per deal. And the other most common place that people want to land is in an investment role or on an acquisitions team. And so these people are probably working for a real estate private equity company, and they want to evaluate new deals in the market as part of a fund structure for a company. And so those are the most common roles or functions in which people tend to want to land, but there are so many other places that you can land in real estate. You can go to business school and be on sort of more on the construction side of development. You can be an asset manager, which is the role that comes into play after a building is bought. You can be on the debt side, similar to what I did before business school, and you can work for a real estate service company, which you might be a broker, or you might do real estate consulting work or placing equity and debt for a real estate company.
Wow, that's awesome. So let's jump into a little bit of your summer experience and
Sure.
see what that looks like.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I originally wanted to do development, and so that was kind of what I was looking for. But then I came across a unique opportunity to do an acquisitions role, sort of what I mentioned, for a company called Beacon Capital Partners in Boston. So they are a private real estate investment company that purchases Class A office buildings in major cities and major markets. I worked between their acquisitions and portfolio management teams. So I did a little bit of we're thinking about this deal, what might the pricing and the underwriting look like? And then on the portfolio management side, it was thinking more holistically about the company's portfolio and how to cut costs or make processes more efficient. So I looked at a lot of prop tech companies and evaluated whether the company should invest in their services to improve their portfolio. And I did that for 10 weeks, really enjoyed the process, got to know the acquisition side of the business, which I didn't know prior to. But ultimately, I knew I didn't want to be in Boston and that I wanted to, well, my goal was to be in Atlanta. But I took the internship fully expecting to re-recruit, which isn't a bad thing to do in real estate because Oftentimes companies are not always prepared to give you an offer after your summer, and that's okay. It's totally normal. And I actually found my internship through an email list / group that I was a part of for a fellowship that I applied to for companies who are looking for students of color or students with diverse backgrounds to add to their intern classes. So yeah.
Awesome. And just to give some people a little bit a better idea, the day-to-day tasks you were doing, could you talk a little bit about the software maybe, or just your autonomy doing that, just to give people a little bit better idea?
Sure. So on the acquisition side, I used Argus a lot, which a lot of people have heard of or may not have heard of, but it's the pretty much premier software for underwriting if you are on the industrial side, in the office space, and more commonly on the retail side. If you use multifamily, mostly you'll use Excel for your deal software. And then in addition to that, I also had special projects that I was doing for the acquisitions team. So I built a model for them because they were thinking about exploring multifamily assets in their next fund, and they wanted a quick model that they could run opportunities through. I also evaluated a company that was trying to help them take their pipeline from Excel to online. It was a startup that they were kind of testing for them so that they can improve their platform. And then on the portfolio management side, it really was a lot of kind of internal strategy, if you will. So working to pilot 3 different companies, each offering some kind of technology service. One was a social media advertising platform, and the other 2 were legal companies, or companies that their software sits in the legal space to kind of make operations more efficient and cheaper for the company. And so we piloted 3 of those services over the summer, and I did a presentation at the end in front of senior management on all 3 of those as to whether or not they should invest their money in their service. And I ended up staying on the semester, or actually almost until graduation, to continue helping out with one of those companies that they ultimately did want to roll out the service for.
Oh, that's awesome. You're kind of doing a little bit of everything, which is super exciting. It's like a jack of all trades.
They got their money's worth.
Yes, certainly. So comparatively to some of the other classmates who went into real estate, how was their experience different?
Yeah, so another one of my classmates, so if I didn't mention before, I was the president of the real estate club last year, and then the person who was the vice president, he took a slightly different path than I did. He had a construction background coming into business school, and then he went to intern for a company in Atlanta that really is a service provider. So they help companies who are maybe looking to buy deals, they help them place or find and place financing for their deals, whereas some people might do that in-house. He was working for a company called Patterson Real Estate Advisory Group that offers a lot of services as a third party to different real estate companies. And he actually got a full-time offer with them and is still working with them now. And I think he worked with them from the summer through graduation. So he kind of, started with one company, stayed in Atlanta, and got the job all through that one company. Whereas I moved to another city, did something with a company that was a little different. And now my full-time role actually is not in office or in multifamily. I'm actually working full-time for a company that does or invests, owns, operates, and develops industrial properties across the world, really. But I'm based in Dallas, doing property management right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, so for people that are watching this video that just heard you talk about real estate and are still excited and would like to learn more about how to break in, let's talk a little bit about the recruiting process. And I think it's worth kind of mentioning that this is recruiting for real estate's done off campus, and there's a lot that people that might not be doing real estate but want to recruit off campus could actually learn from this conversation going forward, because a lot of similarities exist.
Right. So yes. So whereas, areas like finance or marketing, you have a very structured timeline. You do on-campus interviews. If you intern with someone over the summer, pretty much you're going to get the job. Real estate recruiting is very, very different. It's really something that you have to kind of plan and direct on your own because real estate is non-traditional. Now, I will say that we did have some companies come to Emory last year, a good handful, to come and speak to students and do presentations. But what you're really going to want to do to be successful in recruiting is networking. And if you're going to be gunning for real estate, then it's never too early to network. And by network, I mean do coffee chats, Zoom chats now, thanks to COVID. You're going to want to do lunches if you can. You're going to want to, get on the phone with people as much as you can if you can't meet them in person. And you want to start doing that even before you get on campus. And I say that because deals get done based on relationships that people have, and jobs are given out based on the relationships that people have. And so, but I wouldn't get discouraged by this, because I actually liked the fact that I didn't have to go to a lot of on-campus presentations. I could, make my own schedule as far as recruiting went, and it was actually a little bit more comfortable and a little bit lax for me, because I didn't get caught up in the other stuff that was going on. Now, I will say that I did a lot of interviews before landing my full-time job, and I didn't apply really for any of those interviews that I did, because I met people who knew people that were looking for somebody, or, they'd heard of me already from someone else. And I just have jobs coming to me in my email. So, you want to definitely network, have your pitch prepared, have your story ready, and be confident.
So I'm going to go through some of these topics a little bit more, just so people can have an idea of the comparison maybe. So the first one, and we kind of talked about this prior, was just the timeline, and if you want to just explain that doesn't exist.
Sure. Yeah, so there is really no timeline in my opinion, because you want to start as early and as often as you can, working on the job that you want and learning as much as you can. So one of the big things that comes out of networking and why it's so important, because you're trying to decipher what you want to do, and then you're trying to decipher what you don't want to do, right? And so I would say, as soon as I knew I was coming to Emory, I started thinking about, or started going on LinkedIn, thinking about companies that had offices in Atlanta. Did we have alumni at these companies? If so, I'm going to be cold messaging them on LinkedIn, or I'm going to find an alumni list that the school has, and I'm going to cold email all of them. And I'm going to join real estate associations in the city to be members of those and go to events. That's also how you meet a lot of people. And it's one way to get outside of the Emory network, to network. And I will say that I was a member of the consortium. So I went to the consortium orientation program when school started, which is a conference by which companies come to recruit us early as a consortium member. There were not a lot of real estate companies there, but there were some. And so you want to be, do your research when you're considering conferences to go to. If there are not going to be real estate companies there that you're interested in, or companies that have real estate arms, I wouldn't waste your time or your money, because you might be better off using those couple days to network where you are. So there's really no timeline. And then after your internship, hopefully you get a full-time offer. If you don't, then you want to, kick back up the networking as soon as you get back. And I was even networking while I was interning, having calls on my lunch break.
Yeah.
Okay.
You actually answered the next two questions almost perfectly, but I'm just going to ask a question for my own kind of benefit.
Sure.
When you were looking for companies, did you basically make a list of specific companies you wanted to target, or was it really you were open to really any company, and it was really where did you have connections that led you to pursue them?
Mm-hmm. So I will be honest and say that I didn't necessarily have companies in mind when I started interning and when I moved to Atlanta. I started building my company list as I was meeting different people based on places they had worked, the experiences they had at those companies, and whether, they thought it might be a good place for me to attempt to try and get a job. And so I built my list that way and did a little bit more research. You always want to talk to hopefully more than one person at a company if it's one you're really interested in. But I kind of built my list of companies as I did my research because I did not know who was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Only really knew like the major companies like the JLLs that everybody talks about, but I necessarily wasn't interested in doing what they offered. at those companies. So I had to do a little extra work, talk to professors, talk to students, you know, who's here, what do they do really well, and are they someone I should be considering?
Awesome. And I do want to make a little bit of the case of off-campus recruiting can seem a little bit scary at first, but I think what most people have to realize is like, that's how finding a job works post MBA. Like when you get your role after to find another job, it's all networking, it's speaking to these people. So to do it in the MBA isn't anything that should be different from what you're already preparing to work on and practicing. In many respects, the on-campus experience is like a false reality of what finding a job looks like, where it's structured, it's this step to this step to this step. So it shouldn't be as scary because that's much more so how things actually work, and people are aware of that being the process.
Yeah, and I'll just say that recruiting is involved no matter, I mean, networking is involved no matter what area you want to go into. You still have to get to know people because you want them to know you so that they can want you to work for them. So.
Absolutely. And to kind of briefly just talk about the interview and more so just the preparation process of what you did, what you prepared, and how you went about doing that.
Yeah, so I will say the interview process is going to differ in some ways depending on where you want to be within real estate. So your development interviews are probably going to be very different from interviews for an investment associate position. But in general, I've found that real estate interviews are a lot more lax than other industries because real estate people are relationship people, right? They're conversational people. And they want to know about you. They want to know about fit in a lot of ways. And they do understand that a lot of what they do on a day-to-day basis is not rocket science, and that they can teach you the job, but they want to make sure that they're bringing a good person into the company. But that said, if you do want to do a more investment type focused role, or something where, you know, your quantitative skills are going to be a lot more important starting day one, you could have interviews where you'll be cased. And by that, I mean, there'll be a portion of the interview where they will send you a deal that you'll have to analyze. They'll say, you know, we want to buy a 300-unit apartment building, and I need you to do a 10-year cash flow based on these assumptions. And you're going to have to answer questions. Should they buy it? What's, you know, and you're going to have to know important metrics that you're going to want to look at for that kind of deal. So I'll say that, you know, it's going to differ depending on the kind of role that you want, but you want to make sure that you do your homework for sure, and that, you know, when the time comes, you are ready for those technical questions. And then I'll say that behavioral questions are a little less common, but you could get some of those. They're just a little less likely.
Awesome. And just a question that I didn't really get to previously that I think is worth having. In terms of previous MBA background, how important is that for recruiting into real estate?
So I will say that it's important. But people in real estate know that if you're getting an MBA, one of the reasons why you want to do that is to career switch. So it's going to be a little harder if you have absolutely no real estate experience, but if that is the case, then you're going to want to make sure that you're doing a little extra work to get some of the experience that you need to be competitive, because 9 times out of 10, it's very likely that they're going to hire somebody if they have a little bit more experience sometimes. So I will say that it's definitely possible to career switch, but your internship is going to be very important for your ability to do that on a full-time basis. But as long as you have the passion, as long as you've done your research and you're taking the steps that you need to take in the classroom and outside of the classroom to prepare yourself so that when you are in the coffee chat, like you actually know what you're getting yourself into, then you'll be fine.
Awesome. All right, let's transition to the closing, and I have 2 questions here. And the first question is just, if somebody's watched this video, they're super excited about real estate, they want to take that next step, what would you recommend them to do next?
So as a next step, I'm going to direct you to a resource that I actually created for the Real Estate Club last year. It is basically the career guide for anybody who wants to recruit in real estate, and it takes everything that we've talked about on this video and expands on it times 10. So there's everything in there from example resumes, interview questions, to descriptions about different functions in the industry. So if you want to do more research, reach out to the CMC or to the current president of the Real Estate Club to get your hands on a copy of that guide, and then start networking.
Yeah. Is there anyone specific at the CMC that you would recommend reaching out to
whoever is the person in charge of the non-traditional students. I think it's currently Naya, or was Naya. She definitely has a copy. And then Liz Chilla also has a copy.
Yeah, Liz will be able to direct you if you can't find exactly who to speak to. All right, that leads us to our last question, which is definitely my favorite, which is, what are your closing thoughts? What's your advice to this incoming MBA class? Whatever you want to say, it could be professional, personal, anything. Yeah.
So I will say that I know that you guys are coming into business school on uncharted territory, right? And in a lot of ways, doing a non-traditional function like real estate can feel like uncharted territory. But whether you want to do real estate or not, you should be very intentional about the kind of business school experience that you want to have. So if you know that you want to be a leader, like, do things that are going to help you build your leadership skills. If you know you want to do a consulting project during the semester to get real estate experience, sign up for the Real Estate Impact Project and keep your eyes peeled for directed study opportunities. If you know that you want to go out more, be intentional about going out and hanging out with your friends. Like, don't wait to have a buddy. Go meet your classmates and, just get out so that you can meet them, and just be involved, and have fun, because it's going to go by really fast. It's going to seem hard in the beginning, but then when core is over, you're going to be like, oh, it's a brand new world. So I will say that business school was the best decision I ever made. I was stressed out in undergrad at Georgetown, and I was not stressing out going through business school. I had the most amazing experience. I did everything I wanted to do, and if it wasn't there for me to do it, I created it for myself. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, that concludes our interview with Tierra about real estate. Tierra, thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Scott.